impression was that she was physically handicapped because she was deaf and she had a speech impediment, right? She struggled. But very quickly, if you were paying attention, you realized that she actually was handicapped in another way. That she was perceiving reality based on her emotional addictions. She was perceiving reality based on her past. Do you think you and I may do that a little bit in our lives? Tiny bit? Do you know that if you took a group of people that were depressed and a group of people that were socially healthy and mentally healthy and happy people, and you divided them into two different categories, and you showed the depressed people equal slides of a funeral scene and a wedding scene, guess which they say there were more of at the end of the experiment? All the depressed people say, oh, there were way more funeral scenes than there were wedding scenes. And if you take a group of people that are happy and you have them see equal slides of wedding scene and a funeral scene, guess what they always see? They always see the wedding scene. So we tend to perceive reality based on how we're chemically feeling. And this person in the movie had an incident in her life that was so shocking and so important emotionally that she couldn't see her future or see anything other than the way she was chemically feeling. And not only does our brain organize the circuitry a certain way based on our experiences, but we begin to see then that we begin to perceive equal to how we're neurologically wired. They did an experiment with a group of people, and they said, listen, we want you to wear these glasses. And we want you to wear them all the time. And when they gave the people the lenses were divided in half. If they looked to the left, they saw blue. And if they looked to the right, they saw yellow. And they said, wear them when you take your kids to school, or when you go to work, or when you food shop, or when you cook, or when you put your kids to sleep. All the chores that you do, wear them all the time. And at the end of 2 weeks, they brought the people back into the laboratory, and they said, now look to the left. What color do you see? And they said, we don't see a color. They said, no, look to the left. You should see blue. They said, we don't see blue. They said, okay, now look to the right. What color do you see? They said, we don't see a color. And that was one of the first experiments in neuroscience that said that, in fact, the brain sees and not the eyes. Because if the eyes saw and they were just an objective lens, then we would always see blue when we looked one way and yellow when we saw the other. But on a more appropriate level, what we began to realize was that these people were filling in reality. They were overlaying reality based on their memory. Their brain filled in the picture of the external world based on how the mind was working. And we do it all the time, by the way, you and I. So why is it so difficult to change then? Why is it so difficult to begin to change? Do you know that every time you have a thought, you make a chemical? And if you have great thoughts, or unlimited thoughts, or happy thoughts, you make chemicals in a matter of seconds that make you feel great, or unlimited, or happy. In other words, this immaterial thing called a thought fires a set of circuits in the brain, and the brain releases chemicals so that we can feel exactly the way we're thinking. And if you have negative thoughts, or self-depreciating thoughts, or unhappy thoughts, in a matter of seconds, what happens? You begin to feel negative, or unworthy, or unhappy. And so this thought then signals the body for us to begin to feel the way we think. And because the brain is in constant communication with the body, and it's always evaluating the internal environment, what happens is, once the brain notices that it's feeling a certain way, we tend to think the way we feel, which then makes more chemicals for us to feel the way we think the way we feel, and feel the way we think, until we create what's called a state of being. And what happens is, over that cycle of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking, what happens is the feelings become the means of thinking. And if we can't think greater than how we feel, we'll never change. So to change, then, is actually to think greater than how we feel. So imagine a person has an insecure thought. Not any of you, but just anybody. You have an insecure thought. What happens in a matter of seconds? You begin to feel insecure, right? The moment you begin to feel insecure, how do you think? Equal to how you feel, which then makes more chemicals, and we create these personality traits based on thinking and feeling. And this chemical continuity of thinking and feeling creates the state of being that we define ourselves as. And by the time we're 35, that loop of chemical continuity is the way in which we define ourselves as an identity. You still with me, guys? So let's just say now, would you agree then, if you're thinking and feeling, feeling and thinking, and you're making the same chemistry that's conditioning the body for 20 years, that the body will be conditioned for a period of time, like a servant or an animal, to follow the orders of the mind? Would you agree? And would you agree that mind and body are actually working together? So, for example, 20 years of suffering, thinking and feeling, feeling and thinking, you begin to condition the body to get used to that chemical bath of those chemical emotions, and the body then gets enough information for it to become the mind. See, a habit is when the body becomes the mind. So now, you say, okay, that's it. I've suffered for 20 years. Today I'm going to stop. I'm going to declare to the world and to my family and to myself that I'm going to be happy. That's my choice. I'm going to be happy, and I'm going to do all the things that serve me for my own personal joy and evolution. Not that any of us have ever done this, right? And then, so you're no longer thinking and acting in the same way. Would you agree? So the brain is no longer making the same chemicals, and after an hour or so, the cells of the body that are hanging out down below your brain, they think to themselves, what is she doing up there? It's been 20 years, we've modified our receptor sites, and we're already ready for this same chemical state, and all of a sudden, there's no longer any more chemicals. And the cells of the body say this: we can't have this. And so they say, huddle up, huddle up. So they all get together and they say, let's tell the brain that we're the boss. Because we've been conditioned, we've been trained to be this way because of the continuous cycle. So they say, okay, let's get together. And they send a message up the spinal cord, right to the brain. I call that the fast track. Right up to the brain. And it turns on different circuits for us to begin to think in accordance to the way the body now has been accustomed to feeling. And by the same means, because we're not making the same chemicals anymore, the thermostat of that same chemical starts to drop, and the hypothalamus notices that there's a drop in that same chemistry, and it signals the brain circuits for us to begin to think the way we feel. In a matter of seconds, you start to hear these sub-vocalizations, these voices, this chatter, these auto-suggestions, and they're saying, you can start tomorrow. Today is not a good day. Right, because this is what you said when you declared that you were going to change. You said, I'm no longer going to complain. I'm no longer going to blame. I'm no longer going to make excuses. And of course, if you're Italian, I'm no longer going to have self-pity on myself. I'm going to stop all of these thoughts and actions. And because we're no longer firing the same thought processes and the body's become the mind, the body begins to signal the brain through the fast track of the central nervous system and through the slow track of the circulatory system. And then the body begins to influence the way we think. And we talk ourselves out of greatness because the moment that that voice happens, or the moment that sub-vocalization happens, we believe as if it's real. Do you know what I'm talking about? And so then we immerse ourselves in that thought as if it's true, and everything returns back to normal. So if a habit is when the body's become the mind, then to change is to pull the mind out of the body and to put it back in the brain. And that takes an act of will. So that's why the person declares that they want to be happy and they want to do things that to support them in terms of their life and their joy. They declare it, but and an hour later they're sitting on the couch with the remote controls eating ice cream. And they have no idea how it happened. So the mind and the body have to be working together in order for us to change. And so much of our time, we declare something, that we want something, but we have conditioned the body over so many years to be on a different agenda. And if we repeat a thought and action over and over again, we will teach the body to become the mind and to know it better than the brain.